Thank you. So we understand that you're probably looking forward to lunch, and we decided to bring you a fun presentation about research data that we extracted from the Web of Science. So basically, you know about the match, the European match between Ireland and Sweden. It's supposed to be on Monday, the 13th of June. We've just anticipated it to today. And we're doing a research match instead of a football match. So that's basically what we're doing today. We're just taking a look at both countries. So you have some facts about Ireland, some facts about Sweden. You can tell that the population in Sweden is much higher, and so is the number of documents that they have on the Web of Science core collection. Of course, they drive on the wrong side, but still, let's use these indicators as a basis. So this match that we've created here will have three parts. Firstly, we'll analyze the research fields. Secondly, we'll go to collaborations. And last but not least, the funders. So first of all, we have to take a look at Ireland. Like, what do you know about Ireland? When you talk to a foreigner about Ireland, what do they think? They think history. They think about Gaelic, so linguistics would be a nice area to analyze. They think about music, and they might think about beer. So that would be food science and technology. What about Sweden? So when you think about Sweden, you might think about the bridges, so architecture. You might think about fishing, again, food science and technology. The weather, well, in Ireland you can think about the weather as well, and life expectancy. They have one of the highest life expectancies in Europe. So the common ground here would be food science and technology. So that's the subject that we selected to analyze today. So research field analysis. Well, here we have a couple of figures that we've extracted from insights when comparing Sweden with Ireland. So you have, for example, the number of documents that they have, and you can see that on food science and technology alone, Ireland has a slightly higher number of documents. We're analyzing data since the 1980 until 2015. So we have something called the category normalized citation impact, which is slightly the same. The impact relative to the world is slightly higher in Sweden. The open access publications is much higher in Sweden, etc. But this is quite a broad analysis, because we're looking at all the papers produced since 1980 until last year. So now let's narrow it down and do the same analysis just from 2005 until 2015. So in this way, we have a more, let's say, more meaningful analysis, because currently this figure, this number over there, means, well, it's actually one single figure that's representing the whole set of papers that we're analyzing, and now it's shorter. So it must mean something closer to each of the papers, because we're, of course, analyzing averages. And in these situations, you can see that the highly cited papers, for example, have exactly the same number as before. It's because it's, by definition, a highly cited paper is only analyzed for the last 10 years. But the number of documents is quite higher in the Irish ones currently. But still, despite having this difference in the number of documents, we can still analyze the impact that these papers had. And for that, we're using the category normalized citation impact. So you know that different research areas tend to cite other papers in different trends. So a paper in law, for example, will have a hard time getting some citations, while a paper in engineering, say biochemical or biomedical engineering as well, they tend to have more citations quicker. So the category normalized citation impact basically normalizes the number of citations according to the type of document, according to the year it was published, and also according to the research area that we're looking at. So that allows us to compare different number of documents, so sets with different number of documents, but also compare documents from one area with documents from a totally different area. So that's the CNCI we have there. If we narrow it even to a trend graph, so we're still analyzing 2005 to 2015, but now with taking a look at each of the years, Here we're seeing the category normalized citation impact, what I've just explained. And in the last 35 years, we had 1.4. In the last 10 years, we had 136. But in 2014, you can see 156. This means that the publications in Ireland, the publications from Irish authors or Ireland-affiliated authors in food science and technology are 1.5 times above the average in terms of impact, in terms of number of citations when compared to other documents. So quite a compliment. So now we should understand why. Why did Ireland in 2014 had such a big impact? So we can narrow it down to organizations, for example. And here we have a list. On the left, the numbers you find there are the number of documents that each of these organizations had in 2014. And then you have the category normalized citation impact. So you can see that Dublin Institute of Technology, for example, had the biggest impact. However, it had only 12 documents. So that contributes in a way, but then you have another institution that has 144 documents with a slightly lower impact, but the contribution of those 144 is of course much bigger than the one with 3. So we can actually explore the data and understand why is Ireland so good in that year in food science and technology. So going to the next step would be analyzing collaborations. Analyzing collaborations between, with Ireland or with Sweden. Here you have a graph that shows the collaborations between 2005 and 2015 for each of these countries. And you can see the United Kingdom, for example, there. You can see the USA. Germany is also quite well in both cases. But let's take a deeper look at the USA, for example, specifically in the collaborations between these countries and the States. So we can see that between 2005 and 2014, for both countries, there was a similar growth in the collaborations with the US, but there's a different impact in these publications. So in 2014, for example, the publications where Ireland collaborated with the USA had an impact of almost 3. So they were almost 3 times above the world average in this subject. And in 2015, it was much different. While in Sweden, they're very good as well, but still not as good as Ireland in this field. So that's another kind of comparison that we can do when analyzing these two countries. So we could say that the collaborations between Ireland and the US are to be kept. Well, let's talk about funders now. Analyzing the funders, well, there's a lot of data here to analyze, so we just decided to go to the top. So which are the top funding agencies for absolute number of publications for each country? So you can see that in Ireland, it's the Science Foundation for Ireland, and in Sweden, it's the Swedish Research Council. Of course, they have different number of publications, but the Swedish one is higher. But we saw that when we took a look at the general panorama of both countries. So Sweden has a tendency of having more papers generally. So it's not a surprise that they come with more papers here. The funding agency for absolute number of open access records is still the same, so it makes sense. They're producing kind of the same proportion of open access when comparing to the general number. And the funding agency for percentage of open access records, of course here I had to apply a threshold of minimum of 15 documents, is the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports for the Czech Republic, surprisingly. And in Sweden, it's the Technical University of Medical Science, so respectively with 27% and 44%. Of course, if I wouldn't apply any threshold, for example, one funder that had one publication and it was open access, it would be 100%. That's why we had the threshold there. So this was our methodology to make this analysis between the two countries. So, of course, that we just reached the third part of the match. We're just analyzing here a bit more of the funders, and you can see that although Sweden has more papers per funder, when you check the contribution of each funder to the general panorama, in Ireland, the funders tend to have a bigger proportion of the papers, while in Sweden they tend to have more funders and therefore a more variety of funders, and therefore each funder funds less publications. So some conclusions about these hypothetical maps. Of course, Ireland won here for what we presented. It should be like that, but we can analyze this data in different angles. So we chose an angle that was slightly favorable for Ireland in case of food science and technology. Of course, there are areas where we can understand that Ireland can be better, and how. Who should a specific organization collaborate with if they want to have more impact in a certain area? Which are the authors, which are the organizations, which are the countries, and how is that impact measured? So what I want to say with this slide is that data can be analyzed in these different angles according to the impact, according to the category normalized citation impact, or the journal normalized citation impact, for example, because an article can be really good in its category, but in that journal it can be better than the average in the journal, or maybe not as good as the average in the journal, and Insights gives you metrics with that as well. So maybe it was, that journal is a nice journal, but this article wasn't the best there. Or maybe that journal is not that good, but I have metrics that prove that it's better than the average in that journal. So that would emphasize the value of that specific article. And publishing more is not always a synonym of having more impact, like you saw with Sweden. So Sweden had many more papers generally, but in the area that we analyzed, Ireland was quite good. So the number of publications per year for each country has a tendency to grow. You can take a look at the, well, not really, but on the graph on the right, you can see that the highly cited papers, it's the really, the shorter bar, is growing a lot more. Although the rate on the growth of open access publications, for example, is lower in Ireland than in Sweden, the Irish highly cited papers tend to grow faster than the general number of publications in percentage. So it means that Ireland is really betting on open access. Maybe it could bet more when compared to other countries, specifically not with Sweden in this case. So what I wanted to tell you today is that analysis of different environments is always tough. We know about that. But if you have contextualized metrics, if you have metrics that are put in context regarding journals or regarding the categories, then you can at least have a decent analysis between two very different papers. Of course, you have to trust the underlying data that you have your analysis on, because you can have all kinds of metrics, but if the underlying data is wrong, then there's nothing you can do with those numbers. And no one will ever complain about a too informed decision. So it's always better to have more information, analyze it as you can, and then make your own decision than just playing it by ear. I'm here with Massimo Giunta and David Horkey. We have a booth up there next to the coffee breaks. So I imagine you're anxious for lunch. So I think we should leave the questions to the booth. Just stop by our booth if you have any questions, or if you want this presentation, just go there and I'll pass you on a pen or something. Okay? Thank you very much.